In a world of extreme wealth and influence, the most valuable currency isn't actually money.
Right.
Because money is cheap in those circles. I mean, it's everywhere. The real currency is leverage, the hidden connections you have, the secrets you keep, and, well, the extraordinary lengths people will go to protect that leverage once they get it. And today, we're looking at a paper trail of exactly that.
And it is a massive paper trail. We are talking about a 30-year investigative master report.
Yeah.
It spans from like 1995 all the way to 2026. And it maps out this deeply complex network surrounding Paolo Zampolli, Melania Trump, and just a sprawling ecosystem of global political and social power.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are really thrilled you're here because our mission today is to untangle how a modeling agency in 1990s Milan eventually connects to hidden audio recordings, global media investigations, and, one of the most powerful political families in the world. But before we get into the mechanisms of how all this works, we need to set some ground rules for you listening right now, because these sources involve highly prominent political figures. I want to be crystal clear. We are not taking any sides here.
Right. Very important.
We are not endorsing any left-wing or right-wing viewpoints. Our mission is strictly to impartially report on the timeline and factual content provided in this investigative report so you can understand the ideas and allegations contained in the original source material without any spin.
Yeah, that neutrality is just vital. And to keep us grounded as we navigate this, we really have to look at this story through a very specific, disciplined lens.
Okay.
We have to constantly separate the proven from the alleged. The proven elements are the concrete, documented facts, the visa timelines, the filed lawsuits, the legal settlements, and the verified social relationships.
Right, while the alleged elements, the things still fiercely debated or unverified, include the escort claims, rumors of deeper involvement in controversial networks, and the existence of hidden protection agreements. Because if we blur those lines, we completely lose the actual mechanics of what this report uncovered. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, let's start with the proven foundation, because to understand 2026, you really have to understand 1995.
Makes sense.
The report places the starting line in Milan with Paolo Zampolli. And at the time, Zampolli wasn't some political figure, He was running an agency called ID Models.
Right.
And he was a primary gateway for placing European talent into the New York fashion circuit.
And the report specifically notes 1995 as the year Zampolli claims to have discovered Melania in Milan. And this kicks off a very specific, meticulously documented immigration progression.
Yeah, the visas.
Right, so she enters the U.S. in 1996 on a tourist visa. Later, she receives an H-1B work visa, which the report highlights was directly facilitated by Zampolli.
Which is, that's the standard mechanism for bringing international talent into the U.S. market. Nothing unusual there. But the pivot point of this entire 30-year timeline happens in 1998.
At the Kit Kat Club.
Right. At the Kit Kat Club in New York City, Zampolli uses his social access to facilitate an introduction between Melania and Donald Trump.
And from there, the visa progression just accelerates. By 2001, she obtains an EB-1 visa.
Yeah.
And for anyone outside the immigration system, the EB-1 is colloquially known as the Einstein visa. It is reserved for individuals with extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics.
It's a huge deal.
It is. It requires a massive portfolio of evidence showing sustained national or international acclaim.
Securing an EB-1 is notoriously difficult. It doesn't just happen because you fill out a form. It requires a concerted effort to build a heavily documented case of extraordinary achievement.
Yeah.
And then 4 years later, in 2005, Donald Trump and Melania marry, and Zampolli is right there in attendance as a key figure in their orbit.
Wait, okay, let's pause and think about Zampoli's role here, because I'm picturing him as a sort of human router.
A human router.
Yeah, like in a computer network, a router's entire job is to take data packets, bypass firewalls, and direct them to the most high-value destination. Zampolli seems to be doing exactly that, but with social capital.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. He identifies talent, navigates the complex immigration firewall of the H-1B and EB-1, and routes that talent into the highest value social circles at places like the Kit Kat Club. But let me push back on the significance of this for a second. If we just look at this 1995 to 2005 window, Isn't this simply the standard machinery of the 90s fashion world? Like, why is a guy just doing his job in high society the bedrock of a global investigative report?
Well, what's fascinating here is that you're touching on the exact reason this foundation is so critical. Yes, on paper, this was completely standard high society networking.
Okay.
But the report anchors on this decade because it establishes the mechanism of leverage. Zampolli wasn't just a guy who happened to be at the same parties. He built the door to those parties.
Wow.
He held the keys to the visas, the introductions, and the early career architecture.
So he owned the foundational data of that network.
Precisely. And when you own the foundational data of relationships that eventually ascend to the pinnacle of global political power, you become a massive liability or a massive asset.
Depending on how those relationships are managed.
Exactly. That is the only way to understand why the stakes went thermonuclear 2 decades later.
Right, because if this was just a standard 90s business relationship, why did it require the legal equivalent of a nuclear deterrent in 2016 and 2017?
Right.
The context shifts entirely. We go from a 90s modeling agency to a global flashpoint during a massive race for the White House.
The individuals involved are suddenly stepping under the brightest spotlight on Earth, and, suddenly European reporters start digging into that 1990s timeline.
Yeah, according to the investigation, in 2016, allegations originate from Slovenian reporting. A publication called Suthi magazine publishes them, and then the Daily Mail amplifies them internationally.
It blew up.
It did. Suddenly, the global media is flooded with escort allegations regarding the 1990s modeling circuit.
And the initial reaction is a public and very forceful denial. But the real mechanism of power is deployed the following year. In 2017, this massive legal firewall goes up.
And we need to be very clear on the outcome here. There is absolutely zero proven evidence of any wrongdoing by Melania Trump.
None.
The lawsuits filed in response to these publications resulted in the Daily Mail settling and officially retracting the story. Zampolli publicly supported Melania throughout this entire ordeal, and the legal system completely wiped those allegations from the established public record.
The legal strategy functioned flawlessly, but the investigative report asks us to look at how defamation law actually operates in these stratospheres.
Right.
A successful lawsuit buys public silence, it forces a retraction, and it stops mainstream outlets from repeating the claims. What it doesn't do is erase the private history or relieve the immense pressure on the people who actually lived through that timeline.
So it essentially places a heavy lid on a boiling pot. The surface looks calm, but the heat underneath hasn't gone anywhere.
That is the tension the report zeroes in on. 2017 isn't just the year of the public legal victory. The investigation flags it as a period of intense private maneuvering.
Yeah.
And we will see exactly how intense that maneuvering was when we get to the audio recordings that surfaced almost a decade later.
But before we get to 2026, we have to talk about what else was happening in this specific social ecosystem. Because while the 2016 and 2017 media storm was laser-focused on modeling rumors, a much darker, much more serious network was unraveling right next door.
Yeah, we are talking about the exposure of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the Terramar Project.
The report lays out a network map here,
Yeah.
and it is genuinely startling. Between 2019 and 2024, the Epstein network is fully exposed to the public.
Yeah.
And sitting right in the middle of this broader societal reckoning is Terramar.
Terramar was founded by Ghislaine Maxwell, ostensibly as an ocean conservation charity. But the report highlights that it functionally operated as a primary nexus for elite high society networking. It was where politics, modeling, and Wall Street all collided on the gala circuit. And following Epstein's arrest in 2019, the Terramar Project abruptly shut down.
And as investigators worldwide pore over the Epstein flight logs and contact books, Zampoli's name emerges. He is included in the Epstein files, and his links to Terramar draw sustained public scrutiny.
The timing is just incredible. Just as the political and legal fires of the modeling allegations were being contained, this entirely separate, catastrophic scandal engulfs the exact same New York social ecosystem.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because as a listener, it is incredibly easy to see a name next to Jeffrey Epstein's and immediately assume the absolute worst.
Of course.
But I have to play devil's advocate for a second. Being in a wealthy social circle in New York, going to the same charity galas, having your phone number in the Rolodex of a billionaire who turned out to be a monster, that doesn't make you a participant in their crimes.
No, it doesn't.
Extreme wealth concentrates in very small, closed loops. Isn't it highly probable that this is just social and business overlap?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, your pushback is exactly why we established the proven versus alleged rule at the start.
Right.
The report explicitly documents these connections as social and business overlap. Let me be clear. There is no proven criminal activity linked to Zampolli regarding the Epstein network. It is proximity, not verified participation.
But proximity in that specific ecosystem is still a massive vulnerability.
That is the crucial sociological takeaway here. In these hyper-elite circles, proximity is a byproduct of how closed and unregulated these ecosystems are.
Yeah.
But when one node in that network is exposed as a criminal enterprise, the sheer proximity forces investigators to look at everyone nearby. It makes authorities question how other figures in that ecosystem operated their businesses, how they managed their relationships, and most importantly, what kind of leverage existed between them.
It creates systemic doubt. I mean, if the ecosystem was perfectly fine with Terramar operating as a networking hub, what other private arrangements were considered business as usual back in the 90s and 2000s?
Exactly. Which brings us to the present day. Because if this master report proves anything, it's that leverage never really expires. It just lies dormant until someone needs to use it.
And someone absolutely needed to use it in 2025 and 2026. This brings us to the most explosive section of the timeline.
Yeah, this part is wild.
It really is. The catalyst actually starts with a personal fracture in 2023 when Zampolli splits from his partner, Amanda Ungaro.
And personal splits in high-stakes circles rarely stay quiet because the shared secrets suddenly become individual leverage. By 2025 and 2026, Ungaro is making new allegations.
Now, we need to carefully explain the mechanics of what is happening here. These new claims are currently unverified and are tangled up in a deeply complex legal dispute involving an ICE deportation controversy.
Right.
Ungaro is facing potential deportation from the United States.
And this is where the concept of leverage becomes incredibly literal. Investigators are looking at the possibility that these allegations and the release of historical secrets are being utilized as an immigration shield.
An immigration shield.
Yeah. When you are facing the full force of federal deportation, the secrets of powerful people are arguably the strongest currency you have to negotiate your stay or at least stall the process.
It is the ultimate real-world test of the system. She is essentially stress testing the architecture of that 90s network to see who blinks first.
Exactly.
And that stress test provides the momentum for the 2026 bombshell, the Wray Report.
Right. A global media investigation reopens the entire timeline. But the Wray Report doesn't just rehash the 2016 Slovenian articles or the Epstein flight logs. They introduce a completely new variable into the equation.
They air a secretly recorded audio tape from 2017.
And the timing cannot be overstated. 2017 is the exact year the Daily Mail settled their lawsuit and issued their retraction.
Wow.
It is the year the legal firewall was constructed to permanently close the book on the 1990s.
And on this newly released audio, the investigative report details allegations of a protection pact.
Protection pact.
The recording implies that beneath those highly publicized legal victories, there was a private, coordinated system where loyalty and damage control were strictly enforced. How does this change the context of everything we just talked about?
Well, as an analyst, I have to emphasize that the authentication and the full context of this newly released audio are still under intense scrutiny. A secretly recorded tape from nearly a decade ago cannot be taken at face value without rigorous forensic verification.
Sure, audio can be truncated, context can be manipulated.
Exactly. But if we look at the mechanism it implies, the actual machinery of a protection pact, it changes the entire narrative. A protection pact isn't just an NDA where you sign a piece of paper and stay quiet.
Right, yeah.
It implies an active managed defense network. It suggests a high society insurance policy where resources are pooled to suppress threats.
This raises the most important question of the entire 30-year investigation.
Yes. The audio implies that the key players knew there were vulnerabilities that required active protection. It reframes the 2017 lawsuit. It wasn't just a wealthy family reacting to a bad article. It was the execution of a pre-existing damage control strategy operating right beneath the surface.
So what does this all mean for you listening at home? Why should you care about a 1995 modeling agent, a 2017 lawsuit, or an ICE deportation in 2026?
It's all connected.
It is, because we have just mapped out the actual mechanics of how power protects power. We watched a human router in Milan secure Einstein visas and facilitate introductions to the Kit Kat Club. We saw how defamation law can be weaponized to wipe the public slate clean during a global political campaign.
Yeah.
We examined how extreme wealth concentrates in close loops, making proximity to scandals like Epstein almost inevitable for those operating inside. And finally, we saw how a personal deportation battle in 2026 unearthed hidden audio about a protection pact from 2017.
The core tension we are left with is this. If you look at any single piece of this timeline in isolation, there is no proven wrongdoing. Visas are granted every day. Defamation lawsuits are settled every day.
People attend the same charity galas.
Right. Breakups lead to messy allegations.
But when you step back and view all 30 years as a single mosaic, you are forced to confront the ultimate question posed by the investigators. Was this entire 30-year saga simply a massive, sprawling coincidence of right place, right time networking? Or are we looking at a carefully designed architecture of relationships, protection, and influence operating entirely in the shadows?
It's the difference between a series of random events and a deliberate system. And as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on the idea of that 2017 audio.
Okay.
Think about the life cycle of leverage. A protection pact works incredibly well when everyone inside the circle has something to lose and the resources to protect it.
But ecosystems change. When an outside force like an ICE deportation threatens a single node in that network, the calculus shifts. Leverage that was meant to protect the group suddenly gets used to save the individual. When legal glue holding a 30-year network together starts dissolving on international television, you have to ask yourself, in the ultimate game of high society survival, who gets protected and who gets sacrificed?
That underlying mechanism of leverage is exactly why this story, and the political reality it intersects with, is far from over.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of influence. Keep questioning the narratives you see, keep looking for the mechanisms underneath, and we will see you next time.